Let's go on and talk about some of the major legislation on labor management and that relationship. We're still back in the history of unions because it really did establish many different things that we currently have today. Probably one of the biggest things, and this is 1970, they passed a law called the Occupation Safety and Health Administration. It really is, we call it OSHA today. The big push came about regulation concerned about workplace safety and regulations and the need to protect workers from hazardous conditions. Now, if you have a serious issue, you can always call OSHA. OSHA will come out and perform an inspection. Here in California, though, we have something different. There's another group, it's called Cal OSHA. It's a division of the Occupational Safety and Health, but it's the California division. Both OSHA on a federal basis, which is a federal agency, and California, they're both worried about the same topics. Here's what the rules are, and I want you to know this not just for this class, but for the future. If there is a federal law and a state law, federal law trumps state law. It's in charge of it. It rules over the top of state law. And really, if there's a federal law that's involved, it will always take precedent over state law. Now, typically, state law, though, can actually have more laws involved. So you can take all the federal laws. If you look in the Cal OSHA standards, you will see every single federal law that OSHA has in the California standards and several more. California has decided to go off, create their own safety agency, and also add some additional language to it and have their own inspectors go out and check things at a much more detailed way than the federal inspectors would ever do. So that being said, California is much more rule bound on safety than most other states because we have our own special agencies called Cal OSHA. Remember which one takes precedent. Federal law takes precedent over state law, but here in California, we have Cal OSHA, and there's a federal law called OSHA. And by the way, the OSHA really came about by lobbying by the union. Some of the different aspects that set it all up. The Norris-LaGarde Act, it prohibited courts from issuing injunctions against nonviolent activities. Once upon a time, prior to this law, if an employer did not like the fact they're being picketed, they would go to court, file something, an injunction, and stop them from picketing their plant. So you had different aspects of it. So the yellow drugs contract were thrown away. Also, they got rid of the aspect of issuing injunctions against them. Probably one of the things we see today a lot out of these early years is the National Labor Relations Act. That created a thing called the NLRB, and you'll see that mentioned occasionally in the newspapers. The NLRB is the National Labor Relations Board. And what happens is that if you have a group of employees that want to go and have a union, they have to go have an election. And in that election, their goal is to certify a union. Now, by certifying a union, they file the NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board. They determine if they have enough signatures to hold an election. If they do determine that there's enough signatures, then the election is held. It is supervised by the NLRB, and then the majority of the people voting will make a decision as to whether or not there's a union. If you have 5,000 employees in a company and only 100 employees vote, 51 employees, if they vote yes, you will have a union for all 5,000. That's how the Wagner Act or the NLRA works. And that decision would be rendered by the NLRB. So that would be the election and the certification of the union for that business. That's how the rules work. Both sides know it, and so you'll see different aspects of it. Whenever you see people trying to have a big push, you'll see this in Starbucks recently. They unionized several different shops. You also have the Amazon has had a couple of union elections. You'll see the NLRB being brought to the forefront, making decisions as to if one side was inappropriate, trying to influence workers wrongly, or whatever it is. There was one accusation that somebody stole all the different lists in the personnel files of all the employees. Well, those things did happen, but hopefully that's not happening today underneath the current administration. So you have that out there. You also have the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now put this in your notes because this is the one that set the first minimum wage. And the minimum wage right now is still below $10 for us in the United States. Now in the states also can have a minimum wage remember, if there's two different conflicts, the federal laws have jurisdiction over state, but the state can expand that. And in California, indeed, we have massively expanded that up to the tune of over $20 an hour as minimum wage for fast food workers. It's incredible how they focus on this teeny tiny niche when there's a lot of people that will be paid less than that. So you'll see migrations from assistant physical therapist or whatever it may be, people who have semi-skilled jobs also migrating to fast food because it pays better. And of course, we'll probably end up having to pay a little bit more money on top of that. You have also the Labor Management Relations Act. A lot of people, we call it the Taft-Hartley Act. It was passed prohibiting compulsory union membership. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit when we talk about Janus versus AFSCME. So the Landry-Griffin Act, it really dealt with some corruption that was taking place primarily in the Teamsters Union at the time, but it really was about management reporting, making certain that the unions kept their businesses honest. There's some tough law over here in the process. So you'll see all that. But the things I want you to know in this section is know about OSHA and Cal-OSHA and what the difference is between the federal and the state. Also know that the union really was highly involved in helping an awful lot of rules and regulations get passed, things that we just take for granted, anywhere from workers' compensation to OSHA to whatever, benefits and so on. All those take their roots back once upon a time in the unions. The unions now have had a dramatic decline, and we're looking at almost 10% of the population or less are union members across the board. 34% of the public sector and 6.2% of them today in the private sector. Know about the Fair Labor Standards Act and what it's about, the minimum wage. The NLRB is always involved in any kind of union elections, and the Taft-Hartley Act. Major legislation on labor management, things that sit down and help formulate the environment that we have in the world of labor management today. Take care.